everybody. Hi. I'm Kristen from RJ Julia. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. The woman standing to my right, your left, does not really need an introduction, but I'm here, so I'm going to do it anyway. We're here tonight to welcome Roberta Islip, writing as Lucy Burdette, for her new book, A Dish to Die For. So Lucy daylights, not moonlights, daylights as a clinical psychologist. We'll call it Clark Kenting. And by night, of course, we know her as Lucy Burdette, author of multiple mystery series, including the Golf mystery series, among others, and of course, the one that brings us here tonight, the Key West food mystery series. In this, the 12th, the dozen of the series, we join Haley Snow once again as she untangles the latest mystery in Key West. We have a murder once again on the beach that her dog uncovers. We have her mother catering the memorial service for the sadly deceased. And then we have in the old cookbook that Haley is using to create these recipes, in amongst the green turtle stock recipes and things like that, we have some mysteries of the past that are bubbling up to the present. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Lucy. Please silence your phones. Please buy the book, which is around the corner, and we are very excited to have you here tonight. Thank you so much.
I am very excited to be here. Thank you guys for braving this. After these last horrible years, I missed talking to people and seeing real readers, so thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you to RJ Julius, thank you to Kristen and Pam and everybody else who helped set up the event. I love this bookstore. We're so lucky to have it, so hopefully you all buy a ton of books from them. I feel like we've missed out a lot in the last couple years, so I thought I would just review what's happened as far as my publishing world, and then I'll talk about the new book and then open it to questions. So I published last year and didn't get to do an event, a Scone of Contention, which was number 11 in the series, and it's now out in this trade paperback, and I'm sure that they have it here, so if you missed that, it takes place in Scotland, and it's interesting because some people have written and said, really, I did not enjoy going to Scotland. The characters belong in Key West. Well, and other people wrote and said, this is the most ridiculous honeymoon, because they're on a honeymoon trip. You're bringing your old next door neighbor and half of the in-laws, and I said, you know, if you knew Haley, you would know she's not going to leave Miss Gloria home. So to me it made sense. And writing about Scotland, which we'd visited the year before, was so good for my head because we were all stuck at home. And so it was a way of being somewhere else. And in Key West at the time, they had closed, of course everything was closed down, you remember how grim that was, but they had also closed down the road at the top of the Keys, so nobody was coming in and out. There was nothing happening, there were no restaurants to write about. So to me this was refreshing and fun. But some folks who got here early asked, are we going back to Scotland? And I said, I don't think I could get there. But anyway, this was fun. Also, this past year, this book came out, Unsafe Haven. So this I saw they have some copies here, and it's out in paperback now. It's not a cozy mystery. It is suspense. There's somebody trying to get in, I think.
Punch him!
Yeah, let him in. So this one took quite a while to write. I kept working on it, and my agent kept saying, I think you can write darker. You can write darker. So this is darker. It starts with a young girl who escapes from an abusive home, runs to New York, gets taken into prostitution where she becomes pregnant and runs away from that. So I'm not giving too much away because this is all in the first chapter. She takes the wrong train, goes into the bathroom because she's having cramps, one of those horrible subway bathrooms, and gives birth there. And she's in a panic because she's supposed to be meeting this boyfriend. So at the same time, another young woman has just been dumped 2 days before her big wedding. And their eyes meet in the subway, and she thrusts this baby to this other woman, and then the chase is on because bad people, of course, are after both of them now. So if you can take a look into the dark side, this is
It was good.
thank you.
Very good.
It was fun to write, very different.
And some of it takes place in Madison.
Oh yeah. So my helper here says a lot of it takes place in Guilford and Madison. So you're back home. So that's that. Okay. So now I'll tell you about the new book. Let's see. There's not a little ledge here, so we had to do a taping. So A Dish to Die For is the 12th book in the series, and who knew it would ever last that long. But when you have a long series like that, it's important to always be thinking about how to keep it fresh, because I don't like reading books like, I haven't read the Murder, She Wrote books recently, but I'm not so interested in the crime. So somebody who keeps finding a dead body, to me that's not interesting. What's interesting is the reactions, the reasons the person was killed, the way the characters are growing and changing. So that's always what I'm thinking about, is how can I make this different so that people who have been reading for a while won't get bored and say, oh, she's done. Because you'll read that online, they'll say, oh, that author is phoning it in. Well, I don't want to do that. I'll quit before I'll do that. So, and it's also hard because the main character, Haley, is a food critic. She's not a detective, she's not a police officer, she has no business investigating crimes. Although by now she's married to a police detective, so that's complicated too. But it's always a question of why is she involved, and why would she think that she can contribute something to solving the crime. Which always in the back of my head is that she sees things that maybe the professionals don't see. And people will talk to her in a way that they wouldn't talk to the police, because people are afraid of the police. Even though I like the Key West police, they're scary. The chief is about as high as he's a nice guy, but he's intimidating, which is good, I guess, for that job. So my sister and her husband came to visit us a couple of years ago when I was about to start writing this. And we went up the Keys about 12 miles and stopped at a little beach that is very deserted compared to Key West. Key West is so busy and so crowded, but this beach, you're not going to probably run into people. Am I getting told something by that alarm? No. Okay. So we went walking on that beach, and there also is a big driftwood hut where you can tell homeless people have probably lived, and also teenagers come there to party. It's very spooky looking. And so we all, everybody who spends time with me knows when to say, you're going to find a body there. So that was the backdrop. So it's a little bit outside of Key West, some of it, but it's not Scotland. So let's see. So Haley is recovering from the pandemic. I assumed that it would be over, and besides that, who wants to read about it? I don't want to read about it. So I thought a good compromise would be starting at the end of it, where she's still kind of a little blue about all the things that have changed. Restaurants have gone out of business, friends have moved away, and all this is true. So her friend, the psychologist, takes her up there to have a burrito lunch, and they take their dogs and let them run. Well, then she notices that her dog, which is her husband's dog, is missing, and the story goes from there. So I'm gonna read you just a little bit of that opening. So they're sitting chatting about the aftermath of the pandemic, and she says, I grinned and looked out across the water, watching sailboats and shrimpers bob slowly in the distance, and listening to small black birds chittering on a rock that protruded from the surf. Already I felt lighter than when we'd come. Chester and Barkley, who are her friend's dogs, emerged from wading in the water and lay beside Eric in the sand, pink tongues lolling. They had bits of dried sponge tangled in their fur that would be held to comb out, which we know because of our Havanese. I suddenly realized that Nathan Ziggy was not with them. Where's Ziggy? I said, looking at the other dogs as if they might answer. Off in the distance, I could hear a few sharp yips. Eric started to get up. You stay here and relax, I said. I better go see what that little rascal's gotten into. I trotted along the beach, weaving in and out of the skeletal remains of the mangrove trees and into the brush along the chain-link fence, calling for Ziggy. He was pretty good at coming when called, but right now he sounded more excited than usual. I paused to listen. The yips had grown louder, so I kept walking in their direction. I jogged until I reached a hut built from piles of flat white stones and pieces of driftwood, bleached pale gray in the sun. According to Eric, rumor had it that a homeless man had built this place and lived here until he was finally evicted by the authorities. It was decorated with weathered buoys, beer and wine bottles woven into sections of fishing net, old shoes, and sheets of metal that hung from the overhead branches and played a dissonant drum beat when the wind picked up. It almost looked as though the driftwood structure had been divided into rooms, one of them kitchen-like with a fire pit and a large metal bowl. I suspected it was a very popular spot for teen parties. Beyond the kitchen, I saw our sleek little black dog digging frantically in the sand. I called him again and huffed with exasperation when he didn't respond. Nathan and I were going to have a chat about obedience training. Ziggy did exactly what Nathan told him to do, and they'd never taken a class. But I was like the step-parent whose kid announced, "You're not my mother," when asked to do something that didn't suit him. I could picture Ziggy with paws on hips and lower lip jutted out, as if that was possible with a small dog. I approached him leash in hand, prepared to scoop him up and scold him. But as I got closer, I could see that inside the shallow hole he'd dug, he'd uncovered a piece of denim. And then, oh, good gravy, what looked like the fingers on a man's hand. He took hold of the loose denim and shook it hard, growling. Then I noticed that some of the sand around the right of the man's head had been stained dark, the color of blood. My heart began to pound and my knees felt wobbly, but I needed to appear calm if I wanted a chance of getting him away from his prize. Good boy, Zigaroo, I said, squatting down to his level, hoping to lure him over before he destroyed what surely looked like a crime scene. So that's the opening scene. I am not a plotter. I used to be when I was first starting, and I think it would be a lot easier if I was, because I would always know what I was writing. I have a friend who writes 4 books a year, and that's how she does it. She has a plotting group, they plot out everybody's books, and then she writes them. So that, I can't picture it. I don't know what happens until I'm writing it. So I'm always, all that to say, I'm always desperate for ideas. So my 2 writing group, long-time writing group pals are here tonight, and my friend Angela, who's in the back, emailed me one day and said, I thought you would be interested in seeing this, and it was from one of his history sites that he follows about an old cookbook that came from the Key West Women's Club. And so I immediately looked at it, and it looks just fascinating, and so I went on eBay and bought it, and this is it. And it is, so anyway, thank you for that, Angela, because it turns out to be a major plot point. It's all written in the handwriting of the women who did the recipes, and there are designs in it. If you study it, you see each of them is different, and it's all. Oh, here's one by Mrs. J.W. Grady. They're not, the women are not themselves. They're Mrs. So and so, and the introduction is so great. I'm just going to read you a tiny bit of that. Because this is the opening to the canapé section. She says, I won't read a lot of it, but just to give you the idea. Since Key West is both a Navy town and a resort town, the chief demarcation between winter and summer lies in the crackling noise which sounds over the island in the winter. For some time this was attributed to the wind in the palms, until keener perceptions discovered that actually it was the crispy, crackling sound made by many people eating stuffed celery and crunchy crackers. The woman was a fiction writer, and at the end she gives this advice: make your appetizers small, pretty, zippy, and easy to handle, for it is very, very hard to greet an admiral with decorum when involved with a limp piece of celery overstuffed with soft cheese, and practically impossible to exchange witticisms with the suave novelist when one's whole being is concentrated on the problem of what to do with olive pits. It was such a cute book and so clever. So it ends up being a pretty big plot point. The man who was discovered in the sand, his wife is a big mover and shaker at the Women's Club, which I had never been to before I started writing this, but it's right on Duval Street. If you get a chance to go, it's a gorgeous big red brick building, and I was able, the president at the time gave me a tour, even though it was closed for the pandemic, and so there's quite a few scenes that are set there, and this book ends up being one of the clues. So anyway, thanks again.
Did you say the year of the book?
What's,
Did you tell us the year of the book?
no, I didn't. 1949.
Okay.
And then the president gave me a copy of the newer version, which is 1988, but it's not nearly as, it's all typeset, and it's not nearly as cool as this one. So anyway, that was a really lucky find. But that's what my writing life is like, just stumbling from one thing to the next. So if you have ideas, go ahead and send them on. It was so interesting. Somebody wrote me this week who had read the book, and she said that she had come down to the Keys in 1978 with a friend and a tent, and they camped for a while up the Keys, and when they pitched their tent, they didn't realize that there were a lot of men who were staying there too. But it was the time when that was okay and you could feel safe. So she was telling me about this whole time, and I was getting these tingles. Oh my gosh, this is the next book. So I really appreciate getting ideas from the universe. So after I turn in the one I'm working on, I'm gonna call her and talk about that and see, what I can steal from her. So let's see, what else? I think that's all I have. So, what I would love to do is take questions, and then maybe you'll have more interesting things to say. Yeah.
How many recipes have you cooked from that cookbook?
Oh, from this cookbook, they're weird. I made the banana cream pie, which everybody loved. But I mean, there are things like green turtle soup, which you can't get and you wouldn't want to get. And then it's cans of things, you know, it's before the 50s, so I haven't really cooked from it, more from the newer cookbook than the older one. So, yeah.
Just, would you ever consider doing something with Robert Goodall? Going away, or do you fall to superstitious like
Yeah,
that?
so Robert the Doll is a doll, a big doll, who,
Creepy as hell.
yes, and I can't remember the whole story, but he was in the window of a big old home for a long time, looking out at people, and it had something to do with a child dying, I think.
Yeah, it was given to, it was a very abusive owner. The nanny, was Haitian, I believe, or Caribbean, and she created this doll that may or may not have been bad spirits, and all kinds of fun ensues.
Yes. So Robert the Doll is now in a little museum, and he's in a glass case, and it's said, and I believe it completely, that if you don't ask his permission before taking his photo, he's gonna haunt you. And he does, and people, there were letters posted in there around Robert the Doll.
We have one. We apologize because we didn't ask permission and we lost all of our film.
See?
Wow. I think Robert needs to be kidnapped.
Robert is in one of them, I think it's the 7th book, Killer Takeout, but he's not a big part, so I could always go back to him. But anyway, if you go, do not take the picture. Don't challenge him because, you know, it's real, right?
Yes.
Yeah, there's a lot of quirky, weird things in the US. What else can I? Yeah.
Once you have this plot idea, at what point do you know who done it? Right at the beginning, or as you develop characters?
No, it's different for every book, and I'm trying to remember. I think this one was far at the end, because
Okay.
I'm trying to understand who the guy is, and then develop suspects. So, and I've learned from the beginning, you can't just have one.
Oh, yeah.
So you have to have several people who, for several different reasons, might have wanted to do him in.
Yeah.
And then in this case, he's way up the beach. He's up the Keys, buried on the beach. So how did he get there, and why is he there? So it's just a matter of grinding through all those questions and thinking, well, what if this and what if that? And that's where these guys are really helpful too, because they can see things that I haven't thought of. But I think some books I've known a lot earlier, but the story I was just telling you about, which could be the beginning or part of the next book, maybe, obviously somebody, the way I would think about it is somebody would have had to die back then, and maybe it was never investigated, or maybe it was investigated in a cursory way, and this woman has always been haunted by it. So I got so excited because I said, oh, I've got the whole plot, but then I'm thinking, oh no, I don't. I don't know who this happened to or why it happened, and that's kind of the fun of it too. And I find that if I just keep writing, it comes. But if you sit and wait for it, I was talking to Pam about this earlier, you can't wait for inspiration and the muse. You have to just keep going. Yeah. Yeah. Of course, it is easier if you know what the next scene is going to be.
So what is your next book about? The one you're writing?
The one that's due next week,
Oh.
which still doesn't have a title. It has the two Scottish ladies that you met in a Scone of Contention, who won the Scone contest in Great Britain, Scotland. They have come to the U.S. and they're hosting a contest to find the American Scone champion or something. So they are there, and they're teaming up with Miss Gloria, so it's three feisty old ladies. And so that's what's happening. So it's a cooking contest, and there's arson, and it's it's almost done. I'm just trying to go back and make sure the characters are fleshed out and the story seems real. I can remember in my second series, which took place in Guildford mostly, the advice column mysteries. I had a different editor, and she wrote me and said, after I turned it in, "Oh, you did such a good job, and I had no idea that was going to be the murderer." And she said, "But that's partly because he hardly showed up." I try not to do that. It's tricky. That's the hard part, though, is to make the person an obvious part of the story, but not an obvious suspect. And it's not that easy. Yeah.
Have you ever thought of doing a historical bent and having Haley find something of interest or value?
Well, that's what the cookbook was sort of a foray into that, but also that idea that I had would be not deeply historical, but historical going back to the 70s, which is historical these days. We were in northern Scotland on vacation, and I kept seeing things and saying, "Oh my gosh, this is begging to be written about." There was the history there is so old and so amazing. So there was a chapel, and there was a lot of World War II happening there, which I was ignorant of. There was a chapel on Orkney that's a really cute little building, white and red, and it's called the Italian Chapel because it was built by Italian prisoners of war.
I remember reading that.
And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, this is going to be such a great story. So I went in the bookstore in town and found about 4 books. So I said, well, that saves me a lot of time. I didn't write that one at all. Yeah.
One thing that always intrigues me is, how do you name your characters? I always think, you don't want to name somebody that's your sister-in-law that might be offended by
I know.
the persona.
But there are people who beg to be in it. and I usually put them in. Unfortunately, this one that's coming out next year, there's Martha, Martina, there's 4 Mar names, and I can't change it because they're real people who have asked me could they be in it. I'm sorry if that's confusing, but I also, like in A Dish to Die For, try to use old Key West names or a mishmash of them because they fit with the theme.
People who ask to be in the book, are they willing to be the murderer?
Usually prefer not. Because that ends their career. The trouble with having 12 books now is that you have a lot of characters to carry along. It's starting to get to be quite a crowd. So I have to pick and choose, okay, this one maybe just has a bit part this time, but this one, because I mentioned this a little bit earlier, but always thinking about the stake of why Haley's involved with the murder, and a lot of it has to do with friends and family, and people she cares about that are in trouble that might not go to the police. So that's a lot of what happens.
Do you think you would write another thriller again?
Well, I'm at the point where I'm at the end of the contract for now, so I have to see how this one sells for one thing, and if they want more, which I imagine they would, but I don't know that. But I also have several other ideas. So, and one of them would be about a psychologist who maybe lives in Chester, and that was suspense. So, yeah, I might. I love writing these, so we'll see. I don't think I can write more than one at a time, so I have to be realistic and see which idea really pops.
What is your writing process, actually? It sounds like you might have a whole board tracking all the characters that you need to follow, or do you write every day, or what?
I write every day because if I don't, I lose track of the story. I should have, a lot of writers have a Bible, which it keeps track of the characters and what they look like and what books they've been in. And unfortunately, due to lack of organization, I don't have that. So the lucky thing is that when I get the page proofs, the copy editor has named every place that's in the book and every name of every person. So that kind of serves the same purpose. And if I'm desperate, I can post on Facebook and say, is anybody? Because people love to give advice. What time do we have?
We are at 7:33.
Okay, so we can keep talking if anybody has more questions. Yes, Annette.
Do you think your series would ever make a great miniseries?
Yes.
TV?
Yes. I absolutely think you're finding somebody to agree with me. I think, I don't know if you know that Carl Hyacin, who's very well known mystery and kind of humorous writer and also environmentalist, he, one of his books, Bad Monkey, is being made into I think it's a TV series now. So over the past year, there's been a lot of filming in Key West, and they were looking for extras, which we never heard about in time to. But it's expensive to film something down there. But maybe something like the Hallmark Channel, although my agent has tried and they haven't bitten yet. But if you know somebody, honestly, what I think would make a great story, like Mayor of Easttown, did you see that show, which I just love? This would be a show like that.
Yeah.
But so far, bubkas.
Always a chance.
Yeah. Yes, Pam.
So, I've read so many of your books, I feel like Haley is one of my friends. Reading her. But I've also been interested to see how she evolves over the series. And there's some that are obvious. She's gotten married, and I feel like her relationship with her job is shifting, which is interesting. But I'm just curious about how you, as an author and a reader, if you feel like she's evolved over the series. And was there anything in terms of her evolution or development that seems to surprise you?
Yeah. So the question is about the evolution of the character, and which is important to me because as a psychologist, which I don't practice anymore, but the characters are important. When you're writing that first book in a series, don't know much about these characters, so I started with this character who was kind of ditzy and a little bit thoughtless about her friends, which people noticed and complained about. But she's young and she's under a lot of stress, so she gets better. And you begin to see her, that one of the most important things to her is her connections with people. And her former roommate, Miss Gloria, who's in her 80s, somebody was asking me, well, are you going to kill her off? I said, oh no, there's no way, because she's everybody's favorite now. But she started, in that first book, I wasn't planning for her to be a series character. She was living on a houseboat on that same dock that Haley was, and she got clonked on the head and left for dead. That's all I was using her for. She has turned into this spunky, amazing woman who people write and say she's a role model for getting older, and she is. So I don't know where that came from, but so everybody should evolve, or else it's not very interesting to me. So yeah, I'm happy about how she's grown. And other people will say, I really don't get her husband, which, he's tough. That's why.
I mean, he's supposed to be a little bit.
He's a cop, yeah, and that's why I brought his father down, so that you could see where he came from, and begin to understand a little more about him.
Was he always intended to be her husband, or was it supposed to be her boss? Because I'm so glad that it worked out the way it did.
Yeah. So she was dating her boss, and we're limping along. She was kind of attracted to this cop, but I'm very affected by people writing me. So this woman wrote me and said, "Really? That's her boyfriend? There is no tension there. There's no spark. And if you're going to keep writing about him, I'm not reading anymore." So, well, I better check into this. And it's true, I never could really get anything going with them. So Nathan, and Nathan had some unfinished business to sort out too. So, yeah. You're dying of heat back there. So, anybody else? Yeah.
What's the lag time between coming out in hardback and coming out in paperback?
It's a year, 11 months. So the Scone of Contention came out last August in hardcover, and it came out in paperback in July. So it'll be this A Dish to Die For will come out next July in paperback, and then the new one will be hardcover.
Now, the serious book, did that come out in hardcover first, or just?
It did come out in hardcover. It's an English company that mostly sells to libraries. So they do a whole edition that's hardcover that they market to libraries, and then they put out the paperback. So I really have no say over it. It's what they think's going to sell, and I hope they're right. So let's see, I should tell you about the fact that we have wine and cake. I asked, should we have a cake, and they said, oh yes, definitely. Cake. And some seltzer if you're not drinking wine. And there's some bookmarks. I belong to two group blogs. One is Jungle Red Writers, where there's 7 of us who are mystery and thriller writers who blog every day, and there's a whole community there. And so I left bookmarks there. You're so welcome to join us. And also, Mystery Lovers Kitchen is the cozy mystery writers who do recipes every day. So if you're hungry, go there. And I will sign books out in the front. So I'm told you should buy your book.
Yes, please buy your book.
Yes, please buy your book here. Around the corner, we have lovely copies available, and as Lucy said, she'll be signing editions after, cake. So thank you
Thank
so
you.
much
Thank you.
for joining us this evening.
I'm so glad to be back.